Hi, everyone, and welcome to week 11. This week's focus is critical for your work as a social worker: safety and risk assessment, including your roles and responsibilities as a mandated reporter, how to respond to suicide risk, and how to recognize and support clients experiencing intimate partner violence, or IPV. These are difficult but essential areas of practice. You may not feel ready to face them now, and that's okay. My job this week is to give you language, tools, and a framework you can use to build confidence and confidence over time. Here's our plan for the week. We will review general safety considerations for your field practicum. We'll review mandated reporting guidelines. We'll explore safety planning and crisis resource referrals. And we'll also explore understanding and responding to IPV, or intimate partner violence. Let's start with your own safety, especially in field placement settings. Here are a few basic strategies to keep in mind. First, it's always a good idea to let others know where you're going. If you have a list of clients that you plan to see, let someone at your agency know in what order you plan to see them, and then follow that order. If you have to make any changes to your schedule, call into the office and let them know. Use a buddy system whenever possible. It may not always be possible to do your visits with another person, but when it is, especially if the client presents with some additional degree of risk, by all means use a buddy. Learn and follow your agency's safety protocols, especially around home visits. Be sure to get background information before seeing a new client. Is there any particular concern about threat or risk? Always stay alert to your surroundings. Sit near an exit whenever possible. Stay in public rooms or common areas. Even if your agency is fairly casual about safety or they tend not to work with high risk clients, please take your own safety seriously. Trust your instincts. Ask questions. If something feels off, say so. And if you're not comfortable in any situation, leave. You never need to ask permission to leave a situation that feels unsafe to you. As a social worker, you're a mandated reporter, which means you're legally required to report certain kinds of suspected harm. Here's what you must report: known or suspected child abuse or neglect, known or suspected elder or dependent adult abuse, or situations involving imminent risk of harm to self or others. It's important to let clients know upfront about these limitations to confidentiality. You might say, before we start, I want to let you know that I'm a mandated reporter. That means if I become concerned about your safety or someone else's, I may need to share that information with others who can help. That kind of transparency builds trust and so models healthy boundaries. Now, let's talk about suicide screening versus suicide risk assessment. And let's take some time with this because understanding the difference between screening and risk assessment is critical. And knowing how to talk about suicide with care and confidence could one day save a life. Screening tools are brief and designed to identify whether suicide risk might be present. They don't measure severity and they don't give you a full picture, but they can tell you whether further assessment is needed. Two commonly used screening tools are the PHQ-9, which is a depression screen with a single item about suicidal ideation. Over the past 2 weeks, how often have you been bothered by thoughts that you'd be better off dead or hurting yourself in some way? The other screening instrument is the Ask Suicide Screening Questions. This is a 4-question tool used in medical, school, and behavioral health settings to screen quickly and consistently. Both tools are yes or no based, very easy to administer, take a moment or two, at most 2 minutes to complete. If the screening indicates risk. Your next step is a more structured risk assessment. Risk assessment tools explore frequency, intent, access to means, protective factors, and more. Two widely used assessment tools are the CSSRS, or the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, which offers both screening and full assessment versions covering suicidal thoughts, behaviors, intensity, and timing. And the other is the BSSA, the Brief Suicide Safety Assessment. This is a rapid assessment designed for outpatient and emergency settings. It focuses on immediate risk and appropriate safety planning. These tools help you determine whether the person is safe to leave your office or whether more urgent intervention is needed, like hospitalization or a welfare check. One of the most common fears among beginning clinicians is, if I ask someone about suicide, will I put the idea in their head? The research is very clear. You won't put the idea in their head. Asking about suicide does not increase a person's suicide risk. In fact, it often does the opposite. It decreases distress because it breaks silence and shame that often exist around suicidal thoughts. So here's a clinical tip. When someone is having suicidal thoughts, they're almost always relieved when someone asks them about it directly and non-judgmentally. It communicates, you're not alone, and I'm not scared of this conversation. We can handle it together. Something you can say. Sometimes when people feel this overwhelmed, they think about suicide. Has that been coming up for you at all? Or have you had any thoughts about wanting to die or not wanting to be here anymore? Or do you have any current thoughts of ending your life? Your tone matters as much as your words. Calm, direct, and compassionate is your goal. If a client expresses suicidal thoughts but is not at imminent risk, your next step is often to create a safety plan, not to hospitalize them and not to rely on what used to be called a no harm contract. So let's break this down. A safety plan is a collaborative, practical tool that helps clients identify warning signs that they may be entering a crisis, internal coping strategies, things they can do on their own to feel more grounded, social supports like family, friends, or peers they can reach out to for help and support, professional resources like therapists or crisis lines, and steps to reduce access to lethal means in their environment. Those are the components of a safety plan. The plan should be written down, kept accessible. I typically recommend to clients that they put their safety plan on their fridge, on the door of their fridge, and it also should be reviewed regularly in therapy. Above all, it should feel realistic, a source of support, not a test and not a promise. That makes it different from a no harm contract, which are written or verbal agreements where a client promises not to hurt themselves. For example, I will not attempt suicide between now and our next session. These were pretty common in the past, but they're no longer considered best practice. And here's why. They don't actually prevent suicide or suicidal attempts. They place responsibility on the client to protect the provider. They may increase liability for the provider if they're relied on in place of a more thorough assessment or suicide safety plan. And critically, they don't give the client any tools or any support. It's just a rule. So here's a good clinical tip. If someone in your agency is still using a no harm contract, it's okay to ask for supervision or raise the issue gently. Focus on collaborative safety planning, which is supported by the evidence and centered on empowerment, not compliance. You might say to a client, instead of asking you to make a promise not to hurt yourself, let's work together to figure out what helps you feel safe and what steps we can plan ahead of time in case things get worse. This slide lists several national and statewide crisis resources that you should become familiar with, not just as a student, but as a future practitioner. Each of these services offers free, confidential, 24/7 support, and many also provide consultation for professionals, including social workers, interns, and students who are managing a crisis or uncertain about the next steps to take. It's not enough to know that these resources exist. You should take the time to visit their websites, call their non emergency numbers, learn about the kinds of support they offer. The more comfortable you are with these services, the more confidently you can share them with a client in need. For example, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline now offers chat, text, and multilingual options. The California Peer Run Warm Line is great support for clients who need someone to talk to but aren't in acute crisis. Some hotlines, like the National Sexual Assault Hotline, can assist in finding local resources tailored to your client's location and needs. So take a moment now to bookmark these links, add them to your phone, look them up. You may not need them today, but one day one of your clients will. And your comfort and familiarity with these resources will make all the difference in how you respond. Let's now talk about IPV, intimate partner violence. This refers to coercive or violent behaviors between current or former romantic or sexual partners. As you can see, there are four main types of IPV: sexual and physical violence, stalking, and psychological aggression. Remember, IPV affects people of all genders, backgrounds, relationship types. It's not always visible and it's not always reported. Clients may minimize, rationalize, feel ashamed. Your job is to create a space where they feel safe sharing their experiences, even if it takes time. Here's a clinical tip. A client's willingness to disclose IPV and the kind of support they want is likely going to be shaped by their cultural values, their immigration status, their language access, and their lived experiences with discrimination or violence. For example, a survivor from a collectivistic culture may feel pressure to prioritize family unity or avoid bringing shame to their family or community. Someone from a community that's been historically over-policed may hesitate to involve law enforcement, even when their safety is at stake. Language barriers and fears around documentation status may lead a client to underreport, minimize, or entirely avoid formal law enforcement systems. And religious beliefs or cultural gender norms may frame IPV as a private matter, or it may normalize controlling behaviors. It's also important to be mindful of how race, disability, gender identity, or queerness can complicate access to safety or make certain survivors more vulnerable to disbelief or blame. In California, social workers are not mandated reporters for physical IPV, but medical professionals are, and social workers are often part of medical teams. So here's what you need to know. You have an ethical obligation to support clients experiencing IPV. You may need to coordinate with medical staff to ensure that proper reporting takes place. Reports must be filed in the city where the incident occurred, not where the services are being provided. And you may be asked to help the client understand what's being reported or help support them through that process. Even if you're not the one making the report, your support can make a big difference to the client's comfort and feelings of security. This slide lists common signs of intimate partner violence, some of which are physical and others more behavioral or relational. These signs can show up gradually, subtly, or all at once. As a clinician, your role is to observe patterns over time rather than relying on a single red flag. to create space for disclosure without pressuring or confronting, to respond non judgmentally and avoid making assumptions about the relationship, to be aware that survivors often minimize, deflect, or defend the abusive partner, especially early in the helping relationship. Also, your role is to recognize that your safety and the client's safety may both need to be considered when IPV is suspected. When clients give subtle clues like vague references to control, fear, or isolation, respond with open ended, gentle curiosity. So instead of asking, is your partner abusive? Instead, consider asking, how emotionally safe do you feel in this relationship? Or what happens when you and your partner disagree? You're not looking for a gotcha with the client. You're building enough trust that disclosure becomes possible, even if it doesn't happen right away. This week's content is really heavy, but it's also where your role as a social worker becomes incredibly powerful. Your ability to ask difficult questions with clarity and compassion can change the trajectory of somebody's life. And your ability to know when and how to act protects not only your clients, but your ethical integrity. As always, please spend time with this week's material. Complete your reflection journal. If anything feels overwhelming, don't hesitate to reach out. You're not alone. See you again next time.